I do want to say thank you all for coming. And before we get started, I do want to thank the Egan School of Nursing and Health Studies for allowing us in this venue. If you haven't been here before, it's a great space, isn't it? So we encourage you all to come over and use it accordingly. I also want to thank Institutional Research for their work. So you got, as you were coming in, a fact sheet. You know, every year they put together the fact book with university statistics. This is a one-page handout. I'm not going to necessarily refer to it during the talk today. It's really more just for your information as you carry on your work throughout the year. And it's good to know that Institutional Research has these kind of data available for us and would be ready to give you any more backup data or support as we work to become more data informed in all of our decision making going forward. So no specific reference to it. If you choose to look at that instead of me, that's fine, but it's really just for your information going forward. So yesterday marked the last day of classes and the beginning of the end of another academic semester here at Fairfield University. In a few weeks, we will mark the end of another calendar year. And these year ends provide opportunity for reflection, for us to take stock in our accomplishments and to consider what lies ahead. So as I prepared today's address, I thought about all that we as an academic community have experienced in the past year, how we are positioned to move forward into 2018. I spent time reviewing notes from the Academic Affairs Town Hall meeting I held in March, and the address I gave to the general faculty in September, and the messages and communiques I sent to you over the course of the year. And in them, I recognized recurring themes that have become the developing frame for my work as your provost and my vision for academic affairs at Fairfield University. I also thought about the many times throughout the year that I heard from you with appreciation that my messages hit the right notes, resonated with your experience, or helped you find meaning or inspiration in your work. And in turn, your appreciation has been inspirational to me and helped me realize that defining aspects of my vision for academic affairs are worthy of our continued attention. So today you will hear from me some repeated themes, as well as some new ideas on the current and future state of academic affairs here at Fairfield University. Since the arrival of President Nemec on campus in July, my developing vision for academics has been highly influenced by his inspiration for Fairfield University. As he stated in his inaugural address on October 20th, the world needs the work we do. We must be committed to remain relevant. For Fairfield, this is a unique opportunity, an opportunity to be a model for a 21st century higher education, an opportunity to be the modern Jesuit Catholic university. With these words, our 9th president issued us a challenge. And for me as provost, that challenge has been to define modern excellence in academics in ways that lead us toward actionable direction. Those of you who attended my address to the general faculty in September may recall that at that time, I described modern excellence in academics as characterized by heroic leadership, innovative programs, and a clear public purpose. Today, I include innovative pedagogies along with innovative programs and add to the list the characteristic of entrepreneurship. Thus, I now contend that the Division of Academic Affairs can contribute to modern excellence at Fairfield University through heroic leadership, innovative programs and pedagogies, an entrepreneurial mindset, and a definitive public purpose. In many ways, you have embodied these characteristics over the course of the year and are well positioned to continue to advance them over the next semester. My model for heroic leadership comes from the work of Chris Lowney, a one-time Jesuit seminarian who later served as managing director of J.P. Morgan and now writes and speaks on leadership. In his landmark book, Lowney describes leaders formed in the Jesuit tradition as self-aware, innovative, courageous, and loving. He further states that these leadership attributes need not be limited to those informal executive roles, but rather calls on all of us to embrace these aspects of the Jesuit tradition from whatever our position. Noting that everyone is a leader. Everyone is leading all the time, sometimes in immediate, dramatic, and obvious ways, but more often in subtle, hard-to-measure ways, but leading nonetheless. Certainly, in the shared governance context that is academic affairs at Fairfield University, modern excellence in academics requires heroic leadership from all of us. We were confronted with a number of leadership transitions over the past year, and many of you faced that challenge with courage. I know that any time we name names, we run the risk of leaving out certain people, but I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge those heroic leaders among us. Those who had the courage to step into interim positions. I specifically think of Mark Liggis and John Massey in the School of Business. The courage to take on brand new leadership roles. Rich Greenwald, Glenn Sauer, Elizabeth Petrino as the new Dean's complement in the College of Arts and Sciences. Nils Pearson, Maggie McClure, Kathy Schwab, who took on leadership of school roles in the college. Stephanie Storms, new Associate Dean in GSEAP, Walter Rankin and Don Gibson as Vice Provost in my office, Shannon Harding, Kim Gunter, and Peter Bears, to name a few, and every one of you who finds yourself finishing his or her first semester as a department chair. Others of you had the courage to chair faculty committees when no one else wanted to. Mike McDonald on UCC, John Meisnikowski, EPC, Amalia Russo, Academic Council, David Downey, Conference on the Committee with the Board of Trustees, Michael Picano, EPC, Anna Oxon, Faculty Committee on Sustainability, Chris Seeley, Task Force on Free Expression. And the courage to lead in those hard to measure ways, which so many of you have probably done in ways that I don't even know about. But I specifically want to thank Dennis Keenan, Jacqueline Barishka, Irene Mulvey, Carol Ann Davis, and Harvey Hoffman for the things you know you did this semester, even if others don't. Next semester, we will face additional transitions as searches are currently underway for the university's next provost and dean for the School of Business. I thank the chairs and members of their committees for their heroic service on these essential searches. Rich Greenwald, Bob Epstein, Shannon Jerry, John McDermott, Patricia Poley, Linda Rooney, Amelia Russo, and Emily Smith on the Provost Committee, Meredith Kaiser, David Downey, Kathy Nance, David Schmidt, Carl Sharaga, and Walt Lewiska on the DSB Dean Search Committee. And next semester, for the first time in over 40 years, we will appoint a new university registrar. Today, I want to recognize Bob Russo for his heroic and tireless leadership. Bob will be formally recognized at his retirement reception, which is Thursday, January 11th, beginning at 2:30 in Alumni House. We hope to see many of you there. Heroic leadership in the Jesuit tradition is not simply stepping into a formal or informal leadership role. Rather, it is an ongoing process of self-development. And many of you may not know how many of our leaders on campus take this development seriously. And so I want to acknowledge all of those leaders among us who contributed to or participated in leadership development over the past year. Specifically, Emily Smith in the Center for Academic Excellence for having the courage to form a new leadership cohort that is run for the second time this year, and all of you who stepped up to participate in that learning experience. To Meredith Kaiser and Heather Petraglia, who along with John Carroll and I attended the Jesuit Leadership Seminar this summer. To Don Gibson, Brett Mai, and Bob Hannafin, who participated in the ICP program over the year. to Nancy Della Valle for her participation in the Harvard Leadership Seminar, for all those deans who had the courage to undergo 360 evaluations and engage in executive coaching, and every one of you who may be reflecting on what your next step at Fairfield will be. Although I am the one who has the privilege to stand before you with the title provost, I, like Chris Lowney, recognize that we are all leading all the time. Modern excellence in academics requires this continued and collective heroism. As we move into next semester, we need to take this work to the next level. As the NIA site team reviewers noted, while faculty administration relationships through shared governance are substantially improved here at Fairfield University, the flow of communication through our committee structures needs work. President Nemec, General Secretary Sue Rakowitz, and I have begun discussions about how together we might address this concern, and we will be pursuing that in more detail next semester. While Lowney notes that we are all called to be leaders, he further notes that leaders need to be innovators, quoting St. Ignatius Loyola, who described the ideal Jesuit as living with one foot raised, always ready to respond to opportunities. Thus, modern excellence at a Jesuit Catholic university requires us to be innovative in our programs and in our pedagogy. Over the past 4 years, we have undertaken a process to innovate our core curriculum. This initiative, currently under the direction of Shannon Harding, in consultation with college and university core revision committees, seeks to implement a revised core in the Jesuit tradition. The newly titled Magis Core curriculum proposes to introduce our students to the humanities, science, and the arts, highlights the need for our students to become, through this study, educated, mature human beings, to write with clarity and power, to encounter the breadth of human voices and perspectives, and to think in a way that brings important disciplinary distinctions into genuine conversation. A proposal for this Magis Core curriculum, comprised of 15 courses distributed across 2 tiers of experience, orientation and exploration, and animated by 3 signature elements: writing intensive courses, social justice courses, and interdisciplinary experience, passed with overwhelming majority votes by the College of Arts and Sciences on November 10th and the Undergraduate Curriculum Committee on December 5th. The proposal, with a more fully developed budget, will be reviewed by the Educational Planning Committee in January, with a goal of moving to Academic Council and the general faculty for vote during the spring semester. If passed this spring, efforts will begin in earnest for implementation of the new Magis Core curriculum in fall of 2019. During their visit to our campus in late September, members of the NIAS site team expressed enthusiasm for this new core, especially its innovative and creative signature elements. We must work over the next year to bring this innovation to fruition. But the core is just one of the curricular initiatives that we have passed through internal governance just this semester. We also saw a new Bachelor of Science in Public Health, substantial revisions to the curriculum in the School of Engineering, certificates for study in financial mathematics and applied statistics, new minors for religion in the U.S. and Islamic world study. Currently under development are creative and innovative programs for a Peace Corps prep program and certificate for our undergraduate students who would be interested in that volunteer experience, for global internships, for Bellarmine scholars to study abroad in sophomore year, for the first ever collaborative Bachelor of Liberal Studies degree between Fairfield University and the Florence University of the Arts, and major revisions to our honors program for the first time in over 25 years. In addition to new programs, we continue to make advances in new ways of teaching and learning, with active learning animating the signature elements of the new Magis Core curriculum, the array of online and hybrid methodologies showcased by our innovative educators at today's FDEC Day, and advances in simulation for education by the Egan School of Nursing and Health Studies, as well as our Dolan School of Business. As my thinking has developed over the course of the semester, I recognize that to be modern, it is not enough to be innovative. We also must be entrepreneurial. Now, entrepreneurial is a word that sometimes has a negative connotation, as it could suggest a sole focus on making a profit. However, in conversations with President Nemec this semester, I've come to recognize that entrepreneurial could also mean enterprising in a way that brings a Fairfield University education to a wider audience, and in doing so, enacts Ignatius Loyola's directive to refuse no talent or no man of quality. And we'll forgive Ignatius for the gender-specific pronoun here because he was writing in the 1400s, but we know what it means, right? So as I thought about entrepreneurship, I spent some time researching and thinking about how we might actualize an entrepreneurial mindset within academics. I conducted Google searches for characteristics of entrepreneurs. I read lead articles from past and current issues of Entrepreneur magazine. I reviewed biographies of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and I asked people, what does entrepreneurial mean to you? And I've concluded that we in academics might think of an entrepreneurial mindset as characterized by a growth orientation, by calculated risk-taking, and by wise investments. At the Board of Trustees meeting 2 weeks ago, President Nemec and Board Chair Frank Carroll engaged the trustees in a conversation about the size of Fairfield University. The president advanced the position that it is through increase in scale that we can move Fairfield from good to great, or even excellent, and from a regional to a nationally known university. In order to do so, we must be comfortable with growth and take active steps to make it happen. And so I know this begs the question, well, how much growth, right? In spring of 2015, as we finalized the Fairfield 2020 strategic plan, we stipulated that we needed to maintain an undergraduate class size of 4,000 and grow graduate programs in order to ensure our financial stability into the future. Today, as I think it's safe to say, that 4,000 would be a minimum number for our undergraduate student population, and we might consider growing to 4,500 or even 5,000 over a 10 to 12-year period. Further, we might consider matching that 4,000 number in graduate and continuing learners over the same time, so that 10 to 12 years from now, we could be a university of 9,000 students. Not all here on campus at the same time, but of that size and scale and national reputation. We won't achieve these numbers in one giant step, but rather with a growth orientation, we can take smaller steps year over year to increase our scale. We can act in 2 specific ways to do that next semester. For example, as the fact sheet that I gave you shows you, we are within striking distance of that undergraduate class of 4,000. There is concern if we grow in size of students, would we decrease in the quality of our students? What we've learned through our conversations with admissions is that the key to achieving and maintaining a class of 4,000 is to focus on yield. To not admit any more students to Fairfield than we currently do in order to maintain quality, but to make sure that those admitted indeed choose Fairfield University as the school in which they register. Vice President for Enrollment Management, Karen Pellegrino, and the academic deans and I have been in discussions over the past few weeks about what we will do this spring to increase that yield. And I know that faculty in nursing, engineering, the sciences, and the humanities are engaged in those discussions as well. This spring, you will look to hear more from us as we have admitted student days and open houses, and certainly our June orientation as a way to increase yield, be able to raise our undergraduate numbers with no change in quality. At the graduate level, we know that we need to grow enrollments and programs in our graduate, continuing, and professional studies population. Since he arrived on campus in October, our Vice Provost for Continuing Professional Studies, Walter Rankin, has been working with Don Gibson, Jay Razgani, the academic deans, and other senior leaders to develop a strategy to help us do this. Within that large category of graduate, continuing, and professional studies, he has identified a portfolio of programs that currently exist or could exist at Fairfield University. He has ordered those programs from highest to lowest revenue potential and has developed achievable goals for near-term growth of those with the most potential. Some of you are already in conversation with Walter about plans to launch 5 summer high school programs this year, and with he, Don Gibson, and I are engaged with the academic deans on a plan to launch 2 new graduate programs per year for the next 4 years. In order to do this, we know we need to be generating 5 to 6 program ideas per year, managing 3 to 4 of those through internal governance. And so we will be calling on all members of academics to engage their creativity and their efficiency to help us accomplish this goal. Further, we know that growth in traditional undergraduate and adult learner populations will require investment on the part of the university. Investment in the physical infrastructure of our campus, as well as investment in our intellectual infrastructure. At the Board of Trustees meeting on November 30th, the trustees approved the next phase of the master plan, which includes major renovations to some of our academic spaces, upgrades to the science labs in Banno, renovations to Canisius and Donnarumma halls, and the conversion of our library into an academic commons where student support resources can be housed. Along with this, we will see continued improvements to our residential facilities. This $70 million plan will be funded in part by current plant funds and in part with new bonds. In fact, as of 9:30 this morning, we are in the bond market with the hope of securing some of these new monies. We will also be going to market to refinance some of our current loans. These 2 efforts combined will allow for continued payment of existing debt, along with accrual of additional money for this phase 2 renovation, with only an incremental increase to our year-to-year costs and no impact on our current credit rating. These are wise investments. Less visible than new buildings or major renovations to campus facilities is the investment the university is making in its intellectual capital. As we begin the fiscal year 19 budgeting process, it's important to remember that these investments are planned for as well. The 3-year memo of understanding that our faculty salary and administration brought to us last year ensures a 2.25 salary increase for all employees. It raises adjunct salaries for the first time in years. Those are guaranteed in next year's budget. We also knew we were doing 2 executive hires this year, and the provost and DSB dean salaries have been set at competitive prices to bring us the strongest pool possible. We are in the process of hiring 10 new full-time faculty, 8 on the tenure track, 1 new POP, and 1 new visiting assistant professor, with knowing that currently we only are facing 1 faculty retirement, so we will grow our faculty next year, and we're committed to this investment. We also have 19 applications among our faculty for promotion and tenure. We hope that all 19 would be successful, and so we have planned for that in next year's budget. At the same time, we are working to build in incentives for new program development and consider ways to maximize opportunity hires, ways to bring more Jesuit faculty to campus, more faculty of diverse or minority status, or postdocs to participate in program growth in areas that we need to. These types of investment in intellectual infrastructure are not visible, but be assured they are the wise investment we are making as we move forward with an entrepreneurial mindset. Lastly, a modern Jesuit Catholic University has a definitive public purpose. We often talk about the purpose of our university in the Jesuit tradition as being engaged in the formation of men and women for others. And certainly student formation is a large part of what we here at Academics do. In addition to being Jesuit, however, we're also a Catholic university. And so we are engaged in the Catholic intellectual tradition that some have called a 2,000-year-old conversation between faith and reason, or between the church and the world. And that today's Catholic universities are stewards of that conversation as we engage the questions of our own time and place. So engagement in the public conversation is part of the definitive purpose of a modern Jesuit Catholic university. We do engage in that conversation in many ways. Through your scholarship, through your community outreach efforts and projects, and through the speakers that you bring to campus, we have this semester engaged many of the important questions of our time. I have multiple examples of each one of these, but for the sake of time, I would just like to note that this semester alone, we've been in the conversation about how to keep the power on. We've been in the conversation about the current state of Israel, about water quality, with both publications coming out of the School of Business and the Engineers Without Borders work coming out of our School of Engineering. In healthcare, with the opening of this very room, the Palliative Center, the Connecticut Center for Palliative Care, with a grant, a physics grant from Minju to study cancer cell development, and the publication of Matt Tullis's book, Running with Ghosts, which not only recounts his own battle to overcome childhood leukemia, but is a beautiful story of his interaction with healthcare providers. We've had speakers on campus about the opioid epidemic. We've engaged women in politics as Ambassador Susan Rice opened our Open Vision series this year, and the MPA program in Gal, Alberta hosted the first ever Ready to One program here at Fairfield University to help women prepare for local and public office. We've talked already this semester about the work coming out of the Center for Faith and Public Life and Terry Ann Jones's new book about undocumented students that has allowed us to participate fully in the conversation about undocumented persons. The theater program, Red State, Blue State, engaged us in the political conversation about party politics. Jim Martin's attendance on campus allowed us to engage in the conversation about LGBTQ persons and the church. Lisa Monero, who for years out of the Dolan School of Business has been writing about women careers and relationships in the workplace, has been engaged with local and national news media on issues of sexual harassment this semester. We are always stewards of the conversation of social justice, and next semester we will bring that forward as Angela Davis and Sonia Nieto come to our campus. And we have participated in the conversation of the value of a humanistic higher education, as Christian Masbjorg has came to campus to talk about his book, Sense Making, and our own Dean Richard Greenwald has been vocal in the higher education press about what it means to be liberally educated. We are engaged in this conversation, and in order to ensure that we continue to carry out that public purpose, we have work to do on what it means to be an academic university engaged in free expression and critical inquiry. In his inaugural address, the president quoted a draft statement by Robert George and Cornel West that said, "All of us should be willing and even eager to engage with anyone who is prepared to do business in the currency of truth-seeking, discourse by offering reasons, marshaling evidence, and making arguments." The Provost Task Force on Free Expression was charged this October with developing a set of principles for free expression here at Fairfield University that will become the foundation on which we anchor our policies. I want to acknowledge the task force chair, Chris Seeley, and members Bill Abbott, Paul Lakeland, Garrett Alberta, Judy Primavera, Tom Murray, Adam Rugg, Kathy Giappone, Jamie Macbeth, Stephanie Storms, Nels Pearson, and Allison Chris for their service on this task force. I would also thank the library, particularly Jackie Kremer, for her willingness to support this important work. This public purpose has become particularly relevant to me as I recognize that when we engage in the critical conversations of our time, it advances our own thinking about our current situation. And that's what it means to be a university. I want to give you one example of how this was brought home for me. On October 19th, the Bennett Center for Judaic Studies brought to campus Rabbi Michael Marmer. He's the provost of Hebrew Human College and the Jewish Institute of Religion in Jerusalem. He led a breakfast conversation that he called Three Men in a River, in which he interpreted an ancient Talmudic story. Those of us in the Christian tradition might call it a parable, about three different men who approach a river. It's a long story, so I won't go into it. But in Rabbi's interpretation, the river represents modernity, or the challenge to be modern. And each man's approach to the river represents a different way one might approach modernity. The first man approaches it with a desire to hold tight to traditions of the past. The second man approaches it with a desire to ensure his physical safety and stake in the ground. And the third man approaches it in a way that represents inclusion of others. The rabbi's interpretation, because this story is from an ancient text written both in Jewish and Aramaic, and how you interpret the story could be different depending on the language. And the scholarly question of interpretation is, did the three men arrive at the river each on their own, or did they come there collectively? The rabbi used the story to talk about the ways in which people in the current state of Israel are addressing the question of modernity. Some people are solely focused on holding tight to traditions. Some people are solely focused on protecting their turf or stake in the ground. And other people are solely focused on a modern Israel that is inclusive. And the rabbi says, if we interpret the story as each man arriving alone, we only focus on one of those challenges of modernity. But if we say in our interpretation, all three men arrived at the river at the same time, it means that we are required to hold at the same time those three ideas about how we approach the challenge of modernity. For me, it was interesting to sit at this conversation literally the day before President Nemeth gave his address, in which he challenged us at Fairfield to be modern. And I thought about the ways in which we at Fairfield have approached that, or could approach that, as three different men. We could approach that as holding fast to our traditions and not wanting to change our core curriculum. We could approach that as holding fast to our stake in the ground and wanting to maintain our competitive advantage in ways that would prevent us from growing. And we could approach that question in ways that are open to so many that we lose sight of who we are. Rather, as the rabbi suggests Israel might do, I would suggest that we have to approach the challenge of modernity holding all three at the same time. We have to be innovative enough to bring our traditions forward in new ways. We have to be entrepreneurial enough that we stake our claim in the ground in ways that also allow us to grow. And we have to be inclusive enough that in our free expression, we are open to all sorts of dialogue. To do that, we need to collectively be heroic. So I ask you to think about that and join me in the challenge of modernity and crossing the river. And you can begin right now with the courage to ask a question. Seriously, we're taking questions. Brian. Yes, so if we get what constitutes continuing ed? I think if we go back to this slide, Brian, this is most helpful. And so there's a lot. We've been talking about kind of continuing ed and professional studies as if it's this one big bucket, right? Walter and Don have worked with me this semester, say there's a couple buckets here, right? And continuing ed could be all of these things. And you see there's a lot on this continuum. Degree completion, all the way on the right side, are those adults who have started but not finished a bachelor's degree. And certainly there is a market of those people in Connecticut. We recognize that right now, Fairfield is not well positioned to go after that market. We're revising our core. We're still building a structure for part-time students and those things. So it's there, but it's not a high potential revenue for us, and we are not going after it. The one exception I will make is that this joint program that we have through Florence University of the Arts and Fairfield for the BLS might be a start there. So we're cautiously watching that. Continuing studies could also be non-credit and executive education, and certainly we will be making strides toward those. But what we recognize is we need to be wise in our investments and go big over the next couple years on those things that we know have the greatest potential for revenue and attracting new markets at Fairfield, given who we are and where we're located and what we're currently doing. So we're going to start big this summer with summer high school and graduate degree programs while we continue to work with those other aspects of continuing ed. David.
How do you see increasing student diversity and helping the school be more modern, and what is the university doing to help out with that?
Yeah, I do think that a modern world is diverse and has a population of all different faces and all different people. One of the other calculated risks we're taking, and I had it in here, but then I just took it out because there was so much information, is we are working hard, Dr. Nemec and I, with Karen Pellegrino Enrollment Management, to look at our financial aid distribution and to increase particularly first-generation opportunities for first-generation students to come, and look again at that balance between merit and need-based aid. And we would distribute that money a little differently this year. And that's one calculated risk we're taking to increase diversity. We're going to see how that works. We also know that in order to increase diversity among our student population, we need to diversify our faculty and staff population as well. So Dr. Nemec and I are looking at ways in which we might engage with our AJCU colleagues for postdocs to increase diversity. And that's where I have this last on fiscal year 19 opportunity hires. So in addition to the hires that we know that we're doing for those 8 tenure track lines, a POP and a VPA, we're looking to say, can we get in with the AJCU network on this postdoc initiative, or are there other places where there are opportunities to bring more diverse faculty to campus, and are we budgeting for them accordingly? So those are 2 things that we're doing now. Thanks. Steve.
These 10 full-time faculty hires, those are searches that are
Currently going. Yeah.
So next year, they're not a cap on what's going to happen next year.
No, this is searching now to start in September, so we have to pay them in fiscal year 19. In the spring, the deans and I will begin a conversation about the searches for next year. We will look particularly there because that would be to fiscal year 20, but to be starting September 19. If the new core passes, it will coincide with that. So as we look at the new approved searches for next year, which would be new hires in fiscal year 20, we'll look at that number again. This is what we're currently doing. Yeah. So retention is absolutely a focus. Again, that was something I could have on there. We've been working hard on retention over the past couple of years, certainly Heather and her team on the retention committee, and aided in large part by the research coming out of Amy Bozier and the Office of Institutional Research, has helped the retention committee look at where are high risk for retention? And then Heather's and group and others have said, how can we intervene? And so for the first time ever, our retention rate this year is up above 90%, and we need to keep that growing. So retention is absolutely part of what we need to do. I was trying to go back to that slide about growth. What we need to do to grow that undergraduate population. This year specifically, in addition to retention, we're looking at yield. And so we've just really begun those conversations in the past couple of weeks. I think one of the things that we're finding from the admitted student questionnaire, students who are admitted to Fairfield choose to go elsewhere, fill out a questionnaire, and then we get some information back. And part of the reason that they're not choosing Fairfield is that after admission, they're not receiving a lot of high-touch communication from them. So one of the initiatives that we're doing is Karen Pellegrino in enrollment management is working with the deans to say, how can the deans or faculty or even the president himself at a meeting this morning say, reach out to some students to increase their yield. That's one way. Increasing high-touch communication from the time you're admitted to the time you accept. And then also to maximize the opportunities that students have when they're here on student admitted days to interact with our faculty and to learn about our academic programs. One of the other things we find from the admitted student questionnaire is we lose a group of top students because they come to Fairfield and think they're not going to be academically challenged here. Those are, we need yield all around, but specifically when we want to yield those students. So those are just two. But we're open to other ideas. Certainly as people think about what might you do for yields, we'd love to hear it. Patricia.
Yeah, are there any particular efforts or attention to non-Catholic students and non-Catholic faculty to make sure that they feel both welcome here, but also fully part of the process of making the culture?
We haven't talked specifically about that, but as you know, that's a question that's near and dear to my heart. I do think we are doing some, to become more national in scope, we are doing some more geo-marketing, and so we're looking for to attract students from larger metropolitan areas that are not in Connecticut, Atlanta, Chicago, I'm looking at the president to help me out, and San Francisco. So we know that brings all sorts of diversity with us. But it's a good question, Patricia, and one I will think some more about. Other questions? Thank you so much for coming today. Please make sure that you get refreshments. I will be around. Sometimes it's easier to ask a question in a small group in person than in a large group. If I don't have another opportunity to see any of you before the end of the semester, thank you for all your hard work and happy holidays.